manufacturing process. And if you are familiar with kind of big companies that make lots and lots of stuff, like companies that make toilet cleaning, things like that, it would be very difficult for you to find someone who doesn't know something about lean, because it's a real been an advance in thinking in terms of the production system. And the idea being that you have a production line and you don't store very much inventory at all for that production line. So what happens is, instead of what happens in, say, Ford or General Motors or something like that, what used to happen is they would start with an order for a whole bunch of parts. They'd have a whole bunch of parts here, a whole bunch of parts here, a whole bunch of parts here to make a car, and then they would basically, when the order for a car came in, they'd take one from here, one from here, one from here. They would also have whole teams of people just maintaining that inventory. And it would sit there and it would rot and it would rust and it would be a problem. So that was an inefficient way of doing it. Now, this is very simplistic, but basically the whole idea of lean is to do away with that kind of waste of inventory. So they would see anything that was inventory as in sitting in their factory as waste. And to some extent it is. It's stock that's sitting there is just waste. It's money that you've spent that you haven't sold. It's stuff that you've just got there. So there's a whole lot of thinking in manufacturing and kind of production fulfillment systems that's to do with lean. So then some bright people kind of cottoned onto this idea about quite a little while ago, a decade ago or so, and saw how it could be applied to software. So the whole idea is that if you have something that you've invested time and energy in that is not finished and not out there and offering value to your customers, as in something you can use on the website, it is waste. It's just not doing anything. You've spent all this time on it, yet you're focused on it and you're doing something about it, but no one's getting any value from it. So the wireframes that you wrote yesterday, or you designed yesterday, that are waiting for your client or whoever, or your customer or your stakeholder to approve, it's waste, because it's taking up your time and your energy and thinking, and it's not providing any value to your customer yet. Now, obviously, you have to do that, and in order to get something to your customer, you have to go through that process. But the idea is to try and minimize that amount of stuff that is currently outstanding as much as possible, and reduce the amount of time it takes to get something from, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we could do this, to deployed and live. So the idea is to try and minimize the amount that you're doing at once, and to shorten the cycle time for a story going from idea through to production. Now, there's a classic example with a can of Coke in this process, where you have, for example, a can of aluminium Coke. How long do you think it takes to get the aluminium for a can of Coke from the aluminium coal face, as it were, underground in a mine to on Sainsbury's shelf? How long do you think the elapsed time is for that on a typical manufacturing process? Give me a guess. A month? Any more?
A year.
Yep, keep going.
2 years.
It's about 18 months. Okay. How long do you think that particular can of Coke, if you imagine they just took one, how much time do you think, if they just did everything at once and they had it all there, how long do you think that particular can of Coke is being worked on and being moved forward in the process from piece of lump of metal to on the shelf? That particular one, in terms of taking that one, melting it down, making it into a can, filling it with Coke, and literally taking it from a lorry, stacking it, putting it on the shelf. How long?
5 hours?
It's about 20 minutes, 18 minutes. So,
but you can put that the lorry.
Well, yeah, but that's the thing. Now, ideally, in that process, you would have Sainsbury's sitting underground next to the coalface, right? And then you can, but that obviously does not work.
Coca-Cola had their way.
Yes, exactly.
And we would all be living at the Coca-Cola factory.
Now that would save Coke a lot of money,
yes.
Right? And obviously you can't do that. But the idea is to save as much money as you possibly can by minimizing that as much as possible. Obviously there are physical constraints. But do you see what I mean? The idea is to compress that if you can, and just make sure that you realise that you're wasting your can of Coke sitting there for 6 months waiting to be filled is wasting money, because it's not. You've spent money on it, you haven't seen it yet. So it's that kind of thing. And time is money, and all those things. Okay, so that's a little background. This is the way you relate it to Kanban. The idea is that with a Kanban board, it's as simple as this. At the fundamental level, you have what is called options, also known as backlog. You have in progress, and you have done. Or actually, there's a few things here, but this is effectively done or deployed. I'll say live, so you know what I mean. Now you take a post-it, for example, do something on the system, change something, or a feature or a story that you would like someone to be able to do, or a flow, or something like that. and you put it in your backlog. And then when somebody is ready to do something, they add the post-it note. Actually, it's not choose one on board. The one's not on board. This is board. Okay, so you have a number of things here. I'll just take this. And the stakeholders add different things that they would like to do. Okay? Like so. Now, when a developer is ready to work on one of those, or anyone is ready to work on one of those, they put it in progress, and the team works on it. Okay, when that is done, it's put into done. It's as simple as that. That is a Kanban board. Now, the key thing about Kanban boards is that you put numbers on all of these things here. So, for example, you may only allow 2 post-its to be in this at any one time. So that, say you've got a team of 5 or 6, and generally speaking, it's you divide the number of people by 2 and add 1. That's a good way of doing it. So you put 2 post-its here. So someone would come along and say, okay, I'm going to work on the next most important thing. The stakeholder would order this to make sure that they are in order. They would work on this one and this one. The stakeholder would say, actually, based on my meeting with the management this morning, this has now become more important, so it really needs to happen. But you can't screw around with this because this is in progress. If you screw around with this, you're basically screwing up the team because they were working on it, and if you get them to stop doing something and start again, and that's wasteful because they're having to context switch. So they've had all the time in the world to make the decision at the point at which it was being worked on. That's the idea. So and then now if somebody else comes along and says, okay, I can come and help, you go and help one of these guys finish one of these things rather than starting something else and have too many things in progress. Now these numbers are variable and you can set the right ones for your team basically. But the idea is to try and keep this as small as possible, get things going this way as much as possible. Now this is a very simplistic, idealistic way of looking at a Kanban board. A much better way of looking at it would be for a larger team, would have more lanes. And to be honest, it doesn't really matter how you organise it. That's a very simple one. The important thing is that you minimise the amount that's going on at once in any one particular space. So another way of doing it would be, for example, options. Say, now this is potentially contentious, I don't know. You would say you'd have a design phase, perhaps. Then you might have a coding phase. Then you might have a testing phase. And then you might have a deployed phase. It's actually called inventory. So stuff you haven't deployed yet, but is ready to go live. So say you have a QA team, you have QA people, and you have all designers and coders and that sort of thing. You can start with the same backlog you had before. Say you have say you only want to be working on, you have one person in the office who can realistically take charge of this process. That does not mean that other people can't help, but this is generally their job. So you may say, we'll just have one of those at once. Then you have 2 of these at once because you've got maybe 2 or 3 developers. And you have one tester whose job it is to just manually explore everything. And then you have an inventory at the end, which is basically when they be tested. So what happens is, a typical week might go like this. The designer takes one of these, he does all of the wireframes. In the meantime, while he's doing that, the coders are either helping him to keep the process going, or they are trying something else that's new, or they're spiking something. Hopefully that won't take too long, and then basically once this has been finished, the coder then pulls that across to there and starts working on it. That when the designer's finished, he takes the next one, starts working on it. The stakeholder comes and says that's now really important. Nobody cares because they're not being interrupted because they're doing what they're working on. Then the coder gets really stuck on one of these, so the testability comes and helps and tries to kind of unblock the problem. So basically the designer can't do anything else until the code is finished, so he comes and then helps. So then once the code is finished, that goes across to testing. He can then pull up that one, then another team takes that one, the designer takes that one, and it all starts working again. So that is very simply how Kanban works as an idea. That's super simplistic. In that form it won't work because there's a lot more to say about it, but because there's some rules, there's some kind of ground rules about how it works. Like you can't just throw things over the wall to a testing team without checking them properly, and otherwise that just blocks the whole system up. One of the key things is that anyone in this team can effectively stop the line by saying, this isn't working, there's a blockage here, and there's a problem here, I just want to, we have to sort that out. So any one of these people can do that. So it's kind of power to the individual. So that's very, very brief introduction as to how it works.
Would you agree with describing Kanban as an agile